Hi, my name's Mark Stallard. Welcome to Little Green Man, the full show. This is every 2 weeks, twice a month. We'll do a full show, about half an hour or so, give or take, sometimes on current events, sometimes political ideas, but always pertinent to life as a Canadian, life as a human being, life as someone that lives in a neoliberal world. So if you're from the US, from Europe, from the UK, you're probably going to get a lot out of this show as well. So this week's show has a couple of segments on privatization, another segment on why putting policy over human beings is a bad thing, and it is a bad thing. What makes a good politician, what makes them a bad politician, and surprise, surprise, something about political satire. Is it news or is it not? Well, you're going to have to wait till later in the show to find out. If you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and subscribe now. Don't forget to hit the notification bell for notifications that for the clips that we're going to release of other future shows and specials that will be coming out over the next year or so. So sit down, relax, and we'll be right back after this. It was aliens. Positively sure I'm absolutely mad about something. Oh, I'm positively sure I'm absolutely crazy too. Hi, my name's Mark Stallard and welcome back to Little Green Man. Well, right before every election we often hear the question, who are you going to vote for? And the answer may come back eventually to a vague political idea like, well, it's the Workers' Party, or they're good for the economy and businesses, or I've always voted for insert party name. But it can often come down to the fact that the person running comes across as a really nice guy and everyone else seems like jerks. Or it may come down to who was the best dressed during the debates. So who are you voting for is really the wrong question. At the very least, it's not the question you really should be asking yourself. The question that should consume all of us as we come close to an election is, what are you going to vote for? The who is completely irrelevant. Several months ago, a friend of mine told me that they personally knew an MLA. She told me that the MLA in question is quite genuine. He believes in what he's doing. He's a family man and so on. And even more recently, I had another conversation about an executive of a multinational corporation. I was told he's not a bad person, he's a good man. But what makes a good person good in this context? I mean, what makes for a good executive or a good politician? Now, I'm going to demonstrate that the way a person treats their family and friends and the people they meet in one-on-one scenarios, those things that make them good, is no judge of how good or bad they really are. And certainly, it's no measure of how good a politician they will be. And the people closest to them are probably the worst judges of their character. Anyway, so here's a true story. A woman fell in love with a man. She thought he was dashing and dynamic. He was gentle and caring and cried like a baby when he found out his mother was dying of breast cancer. He treated her like a queen, tending to her as she suffered. He had such a close relationship with her that he was devastated by her death and carried the grief for her for the rest of his life. Of course, the woman adored him. They eventually married. One could even see a Romeo and Juliet style ending to their relationship. Now, doesn't this man sound wonderful? And the Shakespeare reference? Well, it only seemed to make him more so. But what a great guy he must have been, such a good human qualities, a man who loved his family and his friends and was loved by his family and his friends. So maybe this could be someone you might vote for, all things being equal. He certainly sounds like someone whose heart was pure gold. But of course you know this is coming, the great reveal. The woman's name was Eva Braun, and her very own caring lover was Adolf Hitler. Now, I may not have told the whole story, but the story was true nonetheless. So Adolf was good to his family. Therefore, he must have been a good man. And his politics must have been good too. Right? So how about one more glimpse at how the family view can be quite a perverse way of viewing a person in power? Angela Hitler, Adolf's half-sister, spoke very highly of him even after the war, and claimed that neither her brother Adolf nor she herself had known anything about the Holocaust. She declared that if Hitler had known what he was doing in the concentration camps, rather what was going on in the concentration camps, he would have stopped them. Because to those that knew the human side of him couldn't reconcile that with his inhuman side. Hitler's persona, his human side, had no bearing on the policies he literally forced upon the world. Adolf's sister sounded quite delusional, didn't she? But maybe she wasn't so delusional. Maybe there was something deeper going on, because if there's something that people do all the time, a nice person in one situation who is observed and be judged to be nice must be nice in all other situations. Maybe it's the human desire for consistency, perhaps. Angela believed Adolf was good, therefore the tales of him being inhuman must be wrong. And now you've had a glimpse of the human side of Adolf Hitler. You're probably not going to change your mind about him, and I don't blame you. And I'd probably be more than a little bit upset if you thought better of them after this, to be fair. However, if you heard a similar story about a person running for office now, it could make you feel more favourable toward that person. And don't forget, Adolf Hitler was once voted into power. So if one political party's campaign presents the candidate as more good than the other, it in no way means the legislation will be forced on you and your neighbours over the next few years will be good. Not at all. So now consider the unnamed MLA I referred to earlier and the multinational executive. They are both considered good by those that knew them personally. But does a good person take away other people's livelihoods so that a government can balance the budget, or so a company can make a more obscenely huge profit and give them no more thought? Does a good person sell off publicly owned property and businesses on the cheap so that a few rich people can get richer, and the working people that previously owned those concerns have to pay more for the same services and goods as a result? Does a good person destroy public healthcare so that people that need it will receive a lower quality service or even go without entirely? Does a good person give a tax break to businesses and corporations and the rich people that own them and pass the costs of those tax breaks on to the working people by way of service cuts and the increased cost of living? Does a good person freeze a minimum wage increase, just an increase, and then give himself a $20,000 a year pay raise? Does a good person put ideology over human beings, knowing that the same ideology has failed the world over? Does a good person sign off on digging up fossil fuels, pumping it through thousands of miles of leaky pipes to be burned as fuel, not caring that the carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere will speed up a cataclysmic crash into climate change? But honest shareholders so can make a few higher dividends. And I can come up with a few more examples. Anyone that puts ideology or their own personal gain over the welfare of human beings has no business representing those human beings. Now, going back to the question, what are you going to vote for? Well, may I suggest that you vote not for the candidate or for the party, but rather for those things that will make your life better. Vote for the policies that have been proven to work elsewhere, or at least have been demonstrated that they will work. Ask yourself, can the political party in question produce research and documentation or other fact-based foundations to their policies? And when those policies become legislation, will they work not just to further a soulless ideology, but to make your life and the lives of your family, your neighbours and your fellow constituents' lives better? Don't ever vote for the good man or the good woman. Don't vote for the good man or the good woman's policies that have failed everywhere else. Never vote for someone a second time who didn't at least make a concerted effort to fulfill their election promises. And don't vote for people. Don't vote for parties. Because in the end, it's only the policies that become law. Little Green Man. This is the back door to the Manitoba legislature. Now, if you hit the subscribe button now, hit the notification bell, then you won't be surprised when they try to stick something up your back door. Public-private partnerships or private finance initiatives are pretty much the same thing. Tax dollars mixed liberally with private investor money to provide products and services that were previously out of reach competitively for private companies. Things like education. And the government provides education for all, funded by tax dollars. Now, direct competition with these government services is difficult, but in some places not impossible. Take public schools. At no point in time have private schools not existed. They've always been there, but there is a caveat. They cost extra. Public schools are not free, they are funded by tax dollars. Therefore, people have already paid for their schooling. Now, unless there's a real need, most people will use the public school system. Private schools, on the other hand, have found niches in the market. Some might want their kids to have their education to include copious amounts of religious doctrine and ritual. Rich people may want to send their children to private schools so their children can mix with other rich people's children. There may be many reasons to send children to private schools, but in these two examples, there is at least a partial element of an apartheid mindset, keeping one's offspring away from the riffraff or the great unwashed. Now, one school for them and a better one for us. So these schools cost those using them over and above the taxes they've paid, although for some reason, some of them come with a healthy tax break. One of the reasons for going private is often given as the public schools are overcrowded and underfunded. And the honest answer is they are overcrowded because they are underfunded, and they are underfunded, for one, because of the tax breaks given to parents who can afford to send their kids to private schools. But it has been shown again and again that schools where children do better have more money than those that don't, whether private or public. But that's enough about the differences between private and public schools. Back to the P3 model. Now, wouldn't it be best to combine the benefits of public and private schools? Public-private partnership sounds like it might do that, but it has nothing to do with the service or product being provided. It only means your tax dollars and private investor money will be mixed up and used to fund it. And in the case of schools, they'll still be run as public schools, but now the private side of the deal demands to make a profit. Now think about it. It's the same amount of money required to run the school if it were private money as if it were public money. But the owners of the private money are expecting a return on their investment. They want their money back with a healthy profit on the top. So how does a public school make money to create a profit? Well, it doesn't. The benefit of public schools is that it educates and prepares children to become, eventually, productive members of the workforce. Now, the real profit isn't seen until after they leave the school, and then it is evidenced in the community and the local economy. Now, it could be years later. So where can the private money make its profit? Well, the only way it can really make its profit is by cutting and providing poorer education, fewer books, not renewing aging equipment, skipping child abuse registry and criminal record checks for school employees, skimping on fire inspections and emergency first aid, and CPR training for staff and contractors. And yeah, you guessed it, I have an entire video on the failure of P3 schools. You can check it out here. So the benefits of the private sector and the public sector in the marketplace has nothing to do with P3 at all. You can easily see the potential problems, particularly with taking a big chunk of your tax dollars and handing them over to a private company or corporation as pure profit. Less money for the service can only logically mean less service for your money. While it could be said that the public sector is an unfair monopoly, it would be highly dishonest to say that, because if we all own the public service, as we do with public schools, and if we all use the service like we hope we can with the fire services, and we can affect then the cost of those services through the political system, well, then we can kind of control them ourselves. It is not a corporation owned by a few people for the financial benefit of a few people. And if you want to affect change in the private company, well, you can't, because it's private, and it keeps itself protected under a shield of proprietary information, and trade secrets go away. While as a public sector concern, it would be owned by all of us. Then we come to the other side of this proverbial coin. In the perfect world, the private sector would include a free market, lots of healthy competition, lower prices, better product. This is sort of achievable, at least for a while, if it's as regulated and those regulations are actually enforced. But without regulations, the free market is just a bloody dogfight, where the biggest and strongest gobbles up its rivals until there are only a handful of big dogs left, all careful to do what the biggest dog is doing. And we're left with a virtual monopoly. A free market with no real choice. You can move from one company to the other, but the prices are the same and the products are just as poor. Now, with public financing models, what you get is a public sector market with a single private sector investor running the show. But public-private financing models have nothing to do with a free market. Generally, they produce no benefits for the citizenry, but provide a safe and competition-less free market for one private company or corporation. Public-private financing models are nothing more than tax-funded private monopolies. Your taxes making corporations and the rich people that own them richer. So if you still believe that P3 partnerships are a good thing, I've got some swampland in Florida for sale that you might be interested in. Little Green Man. This is the back door to the Manitoba legislature. Now, if you hit the subscribe button now, hit the notification bell, then you won't be surprised when they try to stick something up your back door. Hi, welcome back to Little Green Man. This is part 2 of this week's glimpse at private-public partnerships. If you're watching this as a clip, then there'll be a link in the video in the corner. The public-private partnership funding model is part of something called economic liberalism. It's part of the neoliberal agenda, which is a system that is intent on converting public funds and assets into private profits. It's a step closer towards merging governments and corporations, which was at the heart of Mussolini's fascist party in the early 20th century. I mean, really, a merger of corporations and the state. No word of hyperbole, worth looking up if you have the time. Anyway, public-private partnerships and other private finance initiatives can be described like this: to liberally spend your tax dollars on a private venture that is guaranteed to return less value than your taxes paid for, and then demand more taxes to cover the private company's unforeseen costs and to boost their private profits, and still fall short on the goals agreed in the initial contract. So mixing public money with private money to provide public services can be expressed quite simply: less services, a lot more taxes, and rich people getting richer. Tax-funded private monopolies. There was a short piece in The Guardian online this week. It's short, so I'll quote the whole thing. It's a short article, lots of question and answers at the end. I definitely strongly recommend you checking it out. Sources are in the description. So the article is about the state of privatization in the United Kingdom. Taxpayers will be forced to hand over nearly £200 billion. That's $346 billion Canadian to contractors under private finance deals for at least 25 years, according to a report at Whitehall's spending watchdog. In the wake of the collapse of public service provider Carillion, the National Audit Office found little evidence that government investment in more than 700 existing public-private projects has delivered financial benefits. The cost of privately financing public projects can be 40% higher than relying solely on government money, auditors found. They also disclosed that the government has $2.6 million equity in one of the Carillion's major projects. Public money that is now at risk. The UK have been doing this for 25 years, privatising at increasing levels, and they have failed. It's costing people now £200 billion. Think how much money that is. That's insane that the taxpayer has to cover because the private company couldn't deliver on the ridiculous promises that really many people knew they couldn't deliver on in the first place. And now we finally find out in this particular instance that there was an underlying reason, maybe a little bit of corruption going on there with this conflict of interest, that the government had money invested in that company. Well, it's going to see how that's going to turn out. But it's true, we're kind of left with really one conclusion, that the evidence is in, and the conclusion is really so clear. Using private, profit-driven money to pay for and run public projects and public services doesn't pay. They cost. They cost more. They cost a hell of a lot more. So say no to tax-funded private monopolies. Say no to P3s in Canada. Little Green Man. This is the back door to the Manitoba legislature. Now, if you hit the subscribe button now, hit the notification bell, then you won't be surprised when they try to stick something up your back door. Hi, I need to tell you something, and it may come as a bit of a shock, but I think you're old enough to handle it. Jon Stewart did not invent political satire. Now, I know it somehow feels like he did, but he didn't. I think it could be claimed that he sort of invented a new subgenre of political satire, the late night news punctuated with a few jokes, as opposed to the Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update segment, which has never been the same since Norm Macdonald did it, to be honest. Anyhow, and which was actually played really purely for just laughs. Now, under Jon Stewart, The Daily Show actually seemed to present the news kind of accurately and factually, only adding a joke after the seriousness of the story had been explained. At one time, it was reported that about 20% of young people got their news from Comedy Central. Now, since The Daily Show's success and increased viewership, a slew of copycat shows and show segments have sprung up, with the Daily Show correspondents going on to do their own shows, like Stephen Colbert, Sam B, John Oliver, and regular late-night talk show hosts like Seth Meyers doing a regular Daily Show-like segment, although, to be fair, it's probably more like an SNL Weekend Update segment, which Meyers actually did on SNL. Beside the point, pretty much all of these shows and others like them sprung up before the US election of 2016. Not necessarily because of it, but before. And I'm pretty sure that all of them were anti-Trump and pro-Hillary. But as hard as they could mock him, Donald Trump still got elected. So I have to ask, does satire ever change minds? Now, I'm sure there are a few examples of people being convinced by a well-crafted joke, and there's possibly someone having watched Jon Stewart, an interview with Jon Stewart, have changed their mind on one thing or another. But there can't be many, surely. And it seems to me, if you mock something another person believes in, then they just become defensive. You don't convince with mocking, you build walls. Really, really sturdy walls. Now, it can even make it harder to converse, assuming either side wants to converse. At best, it drives a divide between the two camps. The one that believes in the leader, the idea, the way, the other, the jester who belittles and tears down. Now, both Canada and the UK have a long tradition of political satire. In the 1980s, when I lived in the UK, one of my favourite shows was Spitting Image. It made fun of Margaret Thatcher, with her wearing a suit and tie and using the urinals in the men's room. It was funny. And yes, Prime Minister, which showed the hopelessness of the party political system as it struggled in a quagmire of overpowered civil servants. Those shows and others like them seem to make no difference at all. Yes, Prime Minister, rather than affect change in the system, actually became Margaret Thatcher's favourite TV show. And in Canada, the Royal Air Farce, This Harris 22 Minutes, The Beaverton, to name a few, like an old dog. They are toothless, political satire that makes fun for entertainment, but makes no effort to affect change. But make no mistake, I'm still a fan of all the shows I've mentioned. Now, I'm not alone in this observation. Jon Stewart himself said that he felt the same way, possibly one of the reasons he retired from The Daily Show. But he also offers some insight as to why satire isn't very effective for driving change. He said this about the political figures he wanted to expose. We nailed you. And then what do we have to do at that point? We let you go. It's catch and release. Because we have to. Undercut it with a laugh. Here's my one moment. I'm going to, with a scalpel, go to the crux of your identity as a politician and expose it for everyone to see. And then I'm going to make a joke about it and walk away. And you'll laugh and it will humanize you. And it's not just that it humanizes the person with the destructive ideology. It humanizes the ideology itself. It elicits sympathy for the person and the idea that just got hit hard, and the sympathy then is transferred to their destructive ideology. So you see, once people see a politician as a human being, a person, their ideology then becomes transformed too, making their ideology and their ideas more human, more worthy of your sympathy, more worthy of your consideration, more worthy of your time. And likewise, personal insults have the same effect. How someone looks, how someone sounds, how someone walks, and so on. I mean, it's pointless because it takes the focus away from where the focus needs to be. So the only place the focus has to be in order to make an intelligent decision. A good public relations company can make a politician seem appealing, even Adolf Hitler, but to remove the human presented from the idea so we can judge the idea as an idea is essential to democracy. When we judge ideas, by the way, we judge the presenter of the ideas. A certain idiom relating to books and covers comes to mind. And if the ideology cannot stand by itself, if the idea cannot stand by itself, if the policy cannot stand by itself, if the legislation cannot stand by itself, then it isn't worth your time. So I come to the call to action. But it seems right to quote Jon Stewart for this, if I may. Comedy and satire are an expression. They are an artistic idea. They are not activism. It is not anything other than a painting, a song, a joke. None of these can change anything. Nothing that we ever did on The Daily Show meant anything compared to the people on the ground, in grassroots that work tirelessly, in anonymity, against all odds to do what's right, and have to do that facing headwinds that shouldn't be there in the first place. So I say, protest, shout, get mad, march, sit in, strike, complain, write letters, call your representative, join an action group, join a political party, whatever. It's time to activate. Goyagi, get off your arse and get involved. Little Green Man. Hey, before you leave, don't forget to click the subscribe button and click the little notification icon-y thing at the bottom, because you don't want to miss out on what these guys are going to do to you next week.